This part of the Arab League meeting's opening ceremony includes comments from Jordan's Prime Minister, the General Secretary of the Arab League, and Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Abdullah. It's about 35 minutes.
In the name of God, the Powerful, the Merciful, Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, Kings, Royal Princes, and Head of the Arab States. It is a great honor for me that His Majesty, King of Jordan, King Hassan II, asked me to give this speech in front of you on his behalf. Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, Kings, Royal Princes, and Heads of the Arab nations, I would like to salute you. This is the second meeting after the Amman meeting that has decided to organize meetings on a regular basis. And we meet today in Lebanon, which is a great opportunity that we would like to take to congratulate the Lebanese people for their victorious liberation of its land in southern Lebanon. And allow me to thank and express my appreciation to my brother, His Excellency President Emir Lahoud, the president of this summit, and for the Lebanese government for welcoming us and hosting this conference, and for taking all the necessary measures for this summit. I would also like to thank and express my gratitude to the Secretary General of the Arab League and the members of this league for their effort during the last year. Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, the Kingdom of Jordan was honored to host the last Arab Summit in the month of March of last year, and the Palestinian issue, the issue of the whole Arab nation, was going through a delicate period and a very dangerous one, and it still is. And that's because of the politics and repressive measures taken by the Israeli government in dealing with our brothers, the Palestinians, and with their fight in order to get their freedom and build their independent state on their legitimate land with Jerusalem as a capital. Our efforts during the last year were on putting an end to the sufferings of the Palestinian people, the killing and blockade imposed to them. And even the international community has been called upon in order to ask Israel to honor its commitment with the Palestinians during the negotiations and to resume negotiating in order to reach a fair and just settlement based on the international law and the agreements that has been signed between the two parties in the last years. The Jordan efforts in order to put a limit to this crisis and stop the aggression against this people were based on what's following. First, the problem is initially a political problem and not a security problem, and we have to deal with it on this same basis. The problems of the peace process and the escalation in the area were due to the refusal of Israel to implement its commitments towards Palestine, and we have said in all our declarations that the occupation of the Palestinian land is the basis of the problems in the area, and the aggression of the Israeli army against the civilians, Palestinians, is at the basis of the popular reaction among the Palestinians. The peace process has been based on the international law and the UN decisions number 242 and 338, and based on the principle of land against peace. And based on that, no party has the right to do any changes to those references or try to give a new interpretation to it in order to avoid to honor its commitments and what it has signed as agreements. The peace process is a whole process, and the just, lasting and global peace that all the peoples of the area are aspiring to wouldn't be reached without the return of all the rights to the Arab peoples, and first of all, the creation of an independent Palestinian state and finding a resolution to the refugees problem, and the recuperation by Syria of its occupied territories in the Golan Heights by the withdrawal of Israel till the borders of June 4th. The Palestinian Authority, under the leadership of Chairman Yasser Arafat, is the legal representative of the Palestinians. And that's why we'll have to face any attempt aiming to marginalize it or weaken it or find a substitute to it, because that will lead to more instability in the Palestinian territories and the rest of the area. Based on that, and as chairman of this Arab Summit, I did a lot of contacts with the concerned persons by the peace process. First of all, the United States, Russia, the European Union, China, and the United Nations, and other international organizations. And the Palestinian issue was at the head of all these negotiations that I had in the different capitals, and the efforts led, besides what my brothers the Arab did, especially in Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Syria and the National Palestinian Authority, to reach a global and international consensus that stresses on the necessity of ending the Israeli occupation and the creation of an independent Palestinian state. And the positive reaction of the European Union and the United States towards that led to the decision number 1397 taken by the Security Council. Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses and Excellencies, regarding the situation between Iraq and Kuwait, we convened during our last meeting to deploy a lot of effort to forget the past and restore normal relations between the brothers and go back to what it was on before the events. And this is in accordance to the chart of the Arab League that safeguards the rights and safety of all the nations and its sovereignty over its territories and its resources, and prohibits the intervention in its own affairs. According to that, we have insisted several times on the necessity to respect the sovereignty and liberty of the state of Kuwait and the integrity of its territories within its internationally recognized borders. And at the same time, we had to insist on the respect of the sovereignty of Iraq, its unity and its freedom, and to put an end to the sanctions that are imposed to him and that are harmful to its sovereignty on its own territory. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, the terrorist acts on some American cities during last September were a new challenge for the Arabs and Muslims. Some ignorant of the values and principles of Islam and its noble values have taken advantage of these events in order to distort the image of Islam. And we had to communicate with the public opinion in the West in order to reject these accusations. And I insisted to the US administrations and all the Western leaders the position of the Arab nations towards these events. This position relies on what follows. First, the Arab world refuses and denounces the terrorism under all its forms, and the Islam doctrine refuses terrorism, and terrorism is not linked to a particular religion or a particular people without the others. Second, the Arab world rejects any attempt to exploit these events in order to harm an Arab country or make him responsible of these events. And all attempt to link between these events and what's going on in the occupied Palestinian territories is completely refused and has no basis. Third, fighting terrorism in the world should not stop at the military level, but we should find radical solutions and fair ones to many political, economic, and social problems that many people are suffering from. Despair and poverty and the lack of justice in any part of the world is a breeding ground for terrorism. Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses and Excellencies, Israel is trying to convince the world that its security will continue to be endangered even if it reaches a settlement with our brothers, the Palestinians. And the example is that they pretend that the Palestinian Authority is unable to honor its commitments because of the Arab intervention in its affairs. That's why we would like to insist on the commitment of everybody in the decisions of the Rabat Summit that ask us all to respect and support the decisions of the Palestinian National Authority, considering it the legal leadership of the Palestinian people, and not to intervene in its decisions, because this authority knows better than anybody else the sufferings and the interest of its people. The absence of the Palestinian leader asks us all to support greatly our brothers, the Palestinians, in facing the arrogance of Israel. And we have also to insist on our commitment in the decisions of Cairo Summit in '96 that declares clearly that reaching the just and lasting peace, relying on international law and Madrid Conference and the principle of land against peace, is a strategical choice for the Arab nations. And the return of the rights and the occupied territories safeguards the lasting security to all the countries in the areas, including Israel. The initiative of His Highness Prince Abdulaziz is supported by us and constitutes a solid basis for reaching peace in the area, and we consider that initiative as an expression of the continuous involvement of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in supporting the Palestinian people and defending their rights and their cause, especially in this particular period of their fight against blockades and the aggressions done by the Israeli army against the Palestinian civilians. This initiative is a clear message to the world, the whole world, that Arabs want peace and work on reaching peace for all the peoples of the area, and that Israel is the one that impedes reaching that peace. Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, we would like to congratulate Lebanon for hosting the Arab Summit and ask the mighty God to help us to succeed in this meeting and help His Excellency President Emil Lahoud in that mission. And we would like to affirm to His Excellency that we're ready to provide any support for him to make him succeed in that mission. And thank you for your listening. And now I give the floor to His Excellency, the General Secretary of the Arab League, Mr. Amr Moussa. In the name of God, the powerful, the merciful, Your Majesties, Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, Your Excellency, President Emil Lahoud, it is a great pleasure for me to address the Arab Summit during its second meeting, and I would like to express my congratulations to President Emil Lahoud and to Lebanon for hosting the Arab Summit for this Arab year that starts yearly in the month of March, wishing to you the full success in your mission and expressing my presence next to you as well as the presence of the Arab League, while you're leading the march of the Common Arab Work and Arab Cooperation in this delicate period of the history of the Arab world. I would like also to express my appreciation to His Majesty King Abdullah II for his leadership for the Arab March during the first meeting of the summit, wishing him the full success in leading the Kingdom of Jordan. And I would like to mention other good events, and in that regard I would like to express my congratulations for the Prince of Bahrain for the constitutional amendments that have led to an evolution in the political life of the country. Your Majesties, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, it is a great honor for me to put before you my first report on the situation of the Arab world between the period from March 2001 and March 2002. And I don't think that I will be exaggerating if I say that the Arab world during this period wasn't in a great situation. We've known a lot of problems at the level of the peace process and the Arab-Israeli conflict, and we've also seen unprecedented aggressions against the Palestinian people and the threat of using the force against some Arab countries, besides some economic, social, political and humanitarian problems that are facing the Arab countries. We shouldn't also forget the attacks against the Arab culture and the Islamic civilization and the cultural embargo that some people are trying to impose on us. I would like now to expose the introduction of my report entitled Common Arab Work, and it has been distributed to you. I would like to summarize the important elements of this report by saying the following. First, despite the strategic Arab position, based on the fact that peace is the choice of the Arab countries, we've seen a lot of regression at the level of the Palestinian issue that constitute an important part in the common Arab consciousness. And the military and political Israeli institutions believe now, and in the light of the last international evolutions, that it is beyond the law and outside the power of the Security Council and under a full protection that allows it to do whatever it wants in a negative way without fearing any international sanctions. It did impose an aggressive embargo against the Palestinian people and didn't allow the Palestinian President Yasser Arafat to take part in this meeting, but the Palestinian people has taken a national historic position in resisting against the military occupation of Israel. Second, there is a threat for the regional security in case the threat of addressing military attacks against some Arab countries is implemented. Regarding the situation between Iraq and Kuwait, the leaders during the Amman summit have asked to lift the sanctions against Iraq and to deal with the important humanitarian issues related to the prisoners of Kuwait. But the improvements on these files has been limited to some negotiations between the Iraqi government and the UN General Secretary, and that took place in a positive environment, and we hope that it will lead to the execution and implementation of the decisions of the Security Council that will lead to lifting the sanctions against Iraq and respecting the Kuwaiti government at the same time. Therefore, the other Arab issues are still pending regarding the islands of the Emirates that are still occupied and not liberated, and the situation in Sudan, even though we've seen some evolution on the general situation, or the one in Somalia that is still going through a difficult period, but the new interim government that has been put in place constitutes a good evolution in that country. The same regarding the situation in the Republic of Comores, that has approved a new constitution that will guarantee a better future for the country. Six, there are other problems that are equally important to the Arab nations that the Arab League is following the evolution, but I don't have enough time to mention them all. Finally, I would like to say that the Arab political work takes care of its relations with the outside world, especially in a time where we see different theories like the fight of cultures and the end of history. Therefore, the main interest of the Arab countries is to express its thoughts to the world and to take care of its relations with the United Nations and to ask this organization to be the basis of the international decisions related to the peace and security of the world. And our common interest goes towards the relations between the Arab world and Africa and the Arab world and Europe, as well as the relations between our neighbors in Africa, Asia, and Europe. And in this framework of common Arab work, we would like to reach a solid position from all the Arab countries against the international terrorism that was very clear and destructive during the attacks of last September. On the economic and social levels, I would like to say that despite the importance that the Arab countries are giving to push forward the common economic Arab work, the results are still way below the aspirations of the Arab governments and peoples. But despite of that, the picture isn't completely dark, because the Arab Free Trade Area has started its 5th year on January 1st, 2002, and the Arab countries have decreased 50% of its customs fees and same taxes, and the trade between the different Arab countries is increasing, but still with rates that are below our aspirations. In that regard, the Arab League is working now on working to hold the first economic Arab summit that has been decided during the former Arab summit under a common work of the Arab League and the Egyptian government. And the first economic summit will be held between 16 and 18 of coming June in Cairo, and will invite businessmen from the Arab world and from the outside world in order to take care of the economic situation in the Arab countries and push forward the movement of trade and investments and tourism in the area. On the social level, the Arab League, and according to the decisions of the summit, gives a great importance to the collective and common Arab work that we can see as a possibility of being at the head of our priorities. And we've seen in that regard a good step that was concretized in taking steps for a 5-year plan for children and putting in place a women organization. Dear Mr. President, the last summit has asked the Secretary General to modernize the mechanisms of common Arab work and enabling the Arab League to go with the evolutions on the international level. And this is what I'm trying to do now with the help of some Arab expertise through a program of modernization that has started being implemented. And I will read before you the different steps that has been registered later on in order to go with the evolutions of our time. We are now at a crossroads that needs a lot of attention and needs a lot of responsibility. And I am confident that under your leadership and the support of all the Arabs, the march will go forward towards a better organization, a better future, a better Arab world. God bless the Arab nations, and thank you for your attention.
You're on.
In the name of God, the powerful, the merciful, we thank him at any time, he who said in his holy book, don't fight against each other, because this will weaken you. Blessings are upon him, the Prophet, who calls for unity.
مثل الجسد الواحد إذا اشتكى منه عضو تداعى له سائر الجسد بالسهر والحمى. إخواني.
Dear brothers, leaders of the Arab nations, my dear brothers, the people of the Arab nations, I would like to salute you all. And I would like to thank you, Lebanon, the dignity and the unity, the national unity between all its religions and confessions for hosting this summit in a period that is particularly full of events that nobody sees the ending except God. But despite of all that, and despite all what has happened and might happen in the future, the first issue in the conscience of every person in our Islamic and Arab nations is the recuperation of our legal rights in Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. Those rights that are linked to the land, an occupied land, cannot be forgotten, even if time went through, because any right someone is fighting for never dies. We are following closely the intifada of our brothers in Palestine, and it is supported by all the Arabs and Muslims. And through this example, we can see that resistance never ends. And every person, every child, and every adult in Palestine know that there is no way to liberate their land except through the resistance or the global and lasting peace. That's why the Israeli government should be aware of that and should avoid using another way than peace. Dear brothers, Dear Islamic and Arab populations, the Arab, when they accepted peace as a strategic choice, they didn't do so because they were exhausted or weak. But Israel is still committing errors, and it's mistaken if it thinks that it can impose an unjust peace on Arabs through arms. We have entered the peace process in full consciousness and open eyes, and we refuse and still refuse that this process becomes something else where a party can impose whatever it wants on the other one. Peace is a free agreement between equal parties, and there is no peace that can survive when it's built on repression and aggression. The peace process was built on a clear basis, which is the principle of land against peace. And this principle was adopted by the international community, and it was concretized in the decisions of the Security Council number 242 and number 338, as well as it was adopted by the decisions of Madrid Conference in 1991. And it was also adopted in different decisions of the European Union and regional organizations. And during this month, the Security Council of the United Nations confirmed this principle in its decision number 1397. Dear friends, it was clear in our minds and in the minds of our brothers in Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon that the only result from the peace process is the full Israeli withdrawal from all the Arab-occupied territories and the creation of an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as a capital and the return of the refugees. Without that, the peace process is nothing but a waste of time and a series of attempts that will lead to a vicious circle of violence. The return to the negotiating table doesn't mean anything if those negotiations aren't going to go forward and register positive results, as it is the case for years now. And allow me here to address directly the Israeli people and tell them that the experience of violence for more than 50 years now didn't lead so far till to more damages, destruction, and the Israeli society is still far away from peace and security despite its military supremacy and the attempt of aggression and repression. Peace should come from the minds and hearts, not from the arms. It is high time for Israel to resort to peace after it used war during the last years for no results. It should be clear to Israel and to the whole world that peace, while Israel is keeping the occupied Arab territories, don't go together, are not compatible. And I would like to tell the Israeli people that if its government leaves the resort to force and to repression and goes to peace, will never refuse for the Israeli people to live in peace with the other peoples in the area. We believe strongly in using the arms for self-defense and to face aggression. But at the same time, we believe in peace when it's based on justice and when it puts an end for the aggressions. The real peace, when it's instaured, we can have normal relations between the different people in the area instead of the wars and destruction. My dear brothers, based on what has been said, I would like to propose to the Arab League to prepare a clear Arab project to the Security Council based on two important points: the normal relations with and the security with Israel against the full withdrawal from all the Arab-occupied territories and the recognition of an independent Palestinian state with Jerusalem as a capital and recognition of the right of return of the refugees. And I ask and call upon our friends and nations of the world to stand next to the humanitarian rights and support this orientation and put an end to the risks of war and achieve peace for the peoples of the area without any exception. I would like at the same time to ask God to help us in that mission and thank Him at any time, and thank you for your attention.
And later, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad spoke to the group of Arab leaders at this summit in Beirut. This portion of his speech is about 20 minutes.
After the beginning of the peace process in 1991, Syria asked for some guarantees from the sponsors of the peace process, in which they insist on the readiness of Israel from leaving all the Syrian territories. After the negotiations at that time, we had the proposal of Rabin. This proposal insists on the full withdrawal of Israel from all the territories of Golan to the borders of 1967. Then Rabin was assassinated and the peace process was stopped. And when we resumed talking about the peace process by the end of the 1990s, Syria has asked to see back this document that is a guarantee. And the U.S. administration has denied its existence and accused Syria from lying. After a few months, and all of a sudden, the U.S. administration remembered that this document does exist. But they said that this is not a document, but this is a paper. And this paper that is not a paper led to the fact that land is not land anymore, and the result of that was the peace is no peace. And if we go forward with these new terminology in the future, the rights are going to be no rights, and the Arabs no Arabs, and will become a part of the forgotten past. The first point that should be taken into consideration in talking about peace is that we need guarantees of getting back all the territories that have been lost in 1967, and a recognition or commitment from Israel that it's going to withdraw, or at least a declaration from Israel that it's going to withdraw from all the territories. If not, we're losing our time in any negotiations, because we need a real commitment. We don't want to face any ambiguity. Second point is the sponsorship. There is always a dispute going on between Arab countries and other countries about land. Some of these disputes have been tackled, but others are not. But negotiations are ongoing without sponsors. Why? Because these people have always lived through the history with each other, and they have some brotherhood relationships or friendly relations together. But the situation with Israel is different. Israel was created in 1948 after an international decision, and it was created through expansion and killing and terrorism. It created itself as a terrorist state, and it wanted to tell everybody that it is an enemy state that wants to expand through terrorism and force. So direct negotiations are useless if we don't have a third party that plays the role of a sponsor. Who's going to be this sponsor? Any country can send a sponsor or sponsor the negotiations. But what we would like to say is that this sponsor country is not the one that is going to offer a place for negotiations. He should play the role of judge that relies on the international law and takes care of the execution and implementation and respect of this law during the negotiations. And this sponsor should sanction the party that doesn't respect and implement the law. The sponsorship during the last decade was clearly unsuccessful. It failed more during some periods than others, but it was completely unsuccessful because Israel was rewarded while it was standing against peace, and Arabs were sanctioned while they were standing with the peace process. And this sponsorship was depending on the mood of some employees in the administration and some election interests and personal interest. And what I mean to say that the sponsorship process needs continuity. What I ask from any sponsorship in the future is that the role of the sponsor to be defined. We can define it, or they can define that role. But what we need to know is what kind of negotiations we're taking part in. We should set some criteria to define what does the word commitment mean, commitment in peace. Israel is killing every day hundreds of people, and whenever an Israeli leader says in front of the media that we want peace, everybody's applauding him. This is not a criteria. What we need is a criteria related to the implementation. Then these criteria should define how to sanction the party that is not committed in peace. We need a clear process for that. We need also a dialogue within the U.S. administration, because we always hear different remarks and declarations from the different American responsibles and leaders. At the same time, the role that the U.S. has played as a sponsor in the peace negotiation is due to the fact that it is a superpower, and a superpower is a country that have super resources different than the other countries. But what we would like to know is whether the United States is a superpower in front of the whole world except in front of Israel. Whenever it faces Israel, it becomes a very ordinary country and not a superpower anymore. And a lot of other countries in the world have more clear positions towards this issue than the United States. The United States cannot continue to sponsor the peace process in that way. That's why we need the contribution of the European Union, because it's closer to us from the point of view of the geography, the culture, and because it knows more our thinking and our history, and they can bring some proposals that we might accept. That role that the European Union should play should be clear, and the United States should know that it's not against it. But the role of the European Union should be different from the one that it played in the past. It should be based on the culture and European civilization. And we hope also that the United Nations will play a role in that, because in the absence of a clear sponsorship, it's hard to have effective and efficient negotiations. It's clear that Arabs want peace, and clearly Israel doesn't want peace. But the problem also is that the sponsor doesn't have a clear way to reach that peace. The point now that I would like to mention is about us. We can't ask the countries of the world to put pressure on Israel without doing or taking some measures ourselves. We don't need to beg the other countries to put pressure on Israel. We don't need to beg. But what we could do ourselves is to cut our relations with Israel. Every time Syria talks about that subject, everybody stands against it. We're talking about the Arab cooperation, but what we're asking for is a cooperation at the level of the thought. Cutting the relations with Israel depends on the sovereignty of every country and its own politics, but we ask the countries that have relations with Israel to tell us when we should cut our relations with Israel. What are they waiting for? While now thousands of people killed by Israel are not a reason to cut those relations. So what are they waiting for? They are waiting for Israel to throw a nuclear bomb against the Arab countries or take more aggressive measures. I'm only wondering. The most important point is the Intifada subject for us. And there are different proposals on that subject. Some of them think that asking for peace is negative towards the Intifada. And in the West, they think that if we put an end to the Intifada, we'll reach peace. Both thoughts are wrong. The Intifada and the resistance in general are linked to the occupation. And now the concept of peace is relying on the Intifada concept. Why? Because we have to distinguish between two peace processes. One, between two parties that really want to reach peace, and this doesn't exist now. And another peace process between two parties. The first one, that is the Arab party that wants peace, and the other one is the Israeli party and doesn't want peace. We can't reach peace from one side only. And the role of the sponsor was supposed to be to help the party that doesn't want peace to reach peace and want it badly. And this is what actually the Intifada is doing now. Its message to the Israeli people, or the message it's starting to give to the Israeli people, is that the security comes from the peace and from the implementation of peace. So, as much as we want peace, we want resistance and Intifada to go on. As much as we're working seriously towards reaching peace, we're also working in supporting the Intifada in a greater way. The Intifada is an independence movement. It's an independence war. Either we call it an independence movement or independence war. It is a right, because independence is a right to every people. Every nation has an Independence Day, and it is a right for the Palestinian people to be proud one day, hopefully, of its independence. And it is our role to support him. And it's an obligation for us. Even religions stress on the necessity to support people in their drive for independence. We should stop any link between what happened in September 11th in the United States and our cause, our problems. Some of them say that if the Palestinian issue was resolved, what happened in September 11th wouldn't have happened. And some others say that finding a solution to the Palestinian issue now will protect other countries from other terrorist attacks. So, in this logic, the Israeli-Arab conflict has two constituents, the Israelis and the Palestinians, but they always mean in that conflict the Arabs. The Arabs are the terrorist part. Our cause is completely independent from the terrorism and what happened on September 11th. And it doesn't give any explanation to the security problems in the area. Our only reference in any peace process should be Madrid Conference and the decisions of the Security Council. And few years ago, and few months ago, and few weeks ago, an idea of holding a second peace conference has been mentioned, like Madrid II. And this conference was supposed to launch a new peace process, which means that we'll have to express new principles, while there is no other principles but the ones that we convened on and that has been adopted by the international community, and we have no other means to reach peace than through those principles. And holding another peace conference will mean an end for the peace process as a whole. If the first Madrid conference was unable to reach peace, I don't think that any other conference will reach peace. We have to hold on to those principles. I would like to say that many friends throughout the world have tried to push forward the peace process, but they were put under blockade, and because of the different terminology that were created, like going back to the negotiating table, denouncing, stop violence. All those terms were created recently, and we are all with those terms. But while we say we have to stop violence, we have to say who the party that is resorting to violence. If we all denounce violence, we have to say what kind of violence. If we're against violence, so why are we all building armies to defend ourselves against the foreign aggression? Any country that is the victim of an aggression will fight the aggressor. So we have to define what kind of violence we're before. And then we have another term that has been used recently, which is the historic decisions. And no one of these decisions is really historic. I would like to tell my friend that peace needs a plan and not only words and terminology. And it's high time to work in order to save the Palestinian people from the new Holocaust that is imposed on him. Some people are wondering why I'm giving details. It's because they don't want us to give details. All what they want is to say general things. They only want us to say general things, and they are the one who wants to give us the details. We're not going to allow anybody from outside the Arab countries to give us any details under any circumstances. Regarding the situation between Iraq and Kuwait, we've heard a lot of encouraging things during the last month. I've heard them in person, and I think that many of you in different countries have heard good news, and we encourage our brothers in the two nations to go forward, and we're all ready to support them and deploy efforts in order to put an end to the problems between them. Regarding the dangers against Iraq, we shouldn't be impartial. We shouldn't stop by asking Iraq to do so and so and so. What we should do is to be concerned by what's going on and work with Iraq in order to find a clear process that will put Iraq on the way towards normality. And we should refuse any aggressions against Iraq, like we refused any aggression against Kuwait or any other Arab nation. I would like to propose to the summit to create a committee from the countries involved in the peace process, including Saudi Arabia and the Secretary General, in order to explain the initiative of Prince Abdullah in case it's adopted by the summit, to explain it to the countries member in the Security Council and European Union and the United Nations. I would like to propose the support of the Intifada at the moral and material levels, and I propose the creation of stamps that would be distributed on all the Arab countries and to give the returns of the sales to support the Intifada. I would also like to support any resistance against occupation, especially the Lebanese resistance till the full liberation of the Lebanese territories. Finally, I would like to conclude by saying that we have in this summit the disappointments and hopes of the Arab people. I think that the government's aspirations shouldn't follow the aspirations of the people, but they should complete each other. And we don't have too many chances to lose. And we would like to thank Lebanon for hosting this summit, this country that have given a lot to the Arabs and haven't received anything. And I hope that this summit will unify us instead of increasing the gap and dissensions between us.